You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
This episode of Mission Log is sponsored by ExpressVPN. Protect your online privacy today and use our exclusive link, expressvpn.com/missionlog, and you can get an extra 3 months free. That's expressvpn.com/missionlog.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 396, Waltz.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Norman Lau. Each week on Mission Log, we sit in a cave and listen to the voices in our head so we can shout out what we've learned about morals, meanings, and messages.
Today's episode, Waltz, or as the Germans might say, Waltz. It's the one where there's dancing.
Well, not literal dancing, but it's more of a psychological back and forth between Sisko and Dukat. You know, they talk, but it's a waltz, just without the music.
Right, just like that. Okay, I tell you what, I'll get ready for trivia while you tell people how to reach us, and then we'll waltz through the discussion after that.
There are voices in my head, but it's not me. And if you know that, good for you. But here's something you may not know. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek, and that's why we want to hear from you. Use Mission Log Pod to give us a like and a share on Facebook and Twitter, then follow and rate us at Apple Podcasts to help others find the show. You can call us on Skype at Mission Log Pod or by dialing 323-522-5641. Send us an email at missionlog@roddenberry.com, and remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log. I know it's a little hard to read some of John's trivia notes in the cave, but we'll do our best, so let's turn up those fires and get a little bit more light in here, and here's John with this week's trivia.
Here we go. Waltz was written by Ronald D. Moore, and we just had a Ron Moore script a few episodes ago with You Are Cordially Invited, and here we are with a very different kind of story in Waltz. Ron had an original idea that he had developed pretty far along. The idea was to have Sisko visiting Dukat while he's under psychiatric care, but then the majority of the episode would take place in Dukat's head. And actually, that's what they were calling it at the time, Dukat's head, kind of a riff on the old Herman's Head TV show. And the delusion of those characters would be interacting with him throughout that part. So they liked the idea, but the story was short on action or real-world consequence, so they kept the pretense of the voices in his head, but completely rebuilt the plot to include Sisko and their interactions in person. The episode was directed by René Auberjonois, so it's funny, we go back to this idea of René really not feeling like he was cut out for directing, and other than DS9, he did very little in his career. The last episode that we covered of his was in Season 5. That was Ferengi Love Songs. He did say that he probably favored this episode the most, though, out of all that he directed, and it's easy to see why. It's an actor's episode, and he treated those scenes like a play. And he also worked very closely with the director of photography, Jonathan West, to smoothly transition into those scenes where Dukat is visited by his hallucinations. We have some ship mentions here. See, we have the Constellation, which is cool. Ship mentioned in DS9 before, but also mentioned way back in TNG Season 1 in Conspiracy. And we had the USS Honshu, a Nebula-class ship, and we've seen a few Nebula-class ships before, starting in TNG as well. And here we have the Honshu, named after Japan's largest island. Those set pieces for the interiors, by the way, you have a redress of the Defiant corridors, and then the brig that we see is actually used from Voyager, which was in production right next door. And too bad we won't see the Honshu anymore. Very quickly, I'll tell you about guest stars. Well, as DS9 does from time to time, not a whole lot to report. since here we do have Mark Alaimo front and center as Gul Dukat, then if you wanted to say that other of our regular and recurring actors are appearing as characters other than themselves, okay, well, you've got Casey Biggs as Hallucination Damar, you got Jeffrey Combs as Hallucination Weyoun, and Ana Visitor as Hallucination Major Kira.
Welcome to the USS Defiant. We weren't exactly expecting you, so feel free to set up your sleeping bag next to the warp core. Enjoy your stay.
Prologue. Captain Sisko and Gul Dukat are both aboard the USS Honshu, in different capacities, though. Sisko is riding along as a Starfleet officer on his way to appear before a Federation grand jury. Dukat has the less comfortable ride in the brig. He's the subject of that grand jury, and Sisko assures him that in the eyes of the Federation, everyone is innocent until proven guilty. Sisko's take on this is clearly complicated, though. Here's Dukat, racked by the grief of losing his daughter and the shock of the Dominion's retreat and his total breakdown and treatment by Federation doctors, but he's also a threat, a war criminal who needs to stand trial. Their conversation is cut short by the Honshu falling under attack. Act 1, the Honshu didn't survive. That's the news Major Kira got from Starfleet, but there were a couple of escape pods and shuttles that made it out after the Cardassians destroyed the ship. There are survivors, presumably, and one of those might be Captain Sisko. Worf will take the Defiant and assist in the search party of just one other ship, the Constellation, but time is short since they're due to escort a Starfleet convoy in just 2 days. Catching up with Sisko, it turns out he and Dukat somehow managed to escape the attack on the Honshu. Lieutenant McConnell helped get them to a shuttle and then was promptly killed by shrapnel, leaving this odd couple on their own to crash land on an unknown planet. The shuttle won't fly. Sisko had bad plasma burns and a broken arm, which Dukat couldn't mend with the med kit, so he made a rudimentary cast. There's a transmitter which Dukat has set up to send out a distress signal, and whomever responds to it will determine which of these two will be the captor or the prisoner. As Dukat leaves the cave where they've set up camp to find some additional food to stretch out their rations, he's distracted by a familiar face. It's Weyoun, taunting Dukat mercilessly about his weakness and mental breakdown and how he should kill Sisko now. It's more than Dukat can take, so he takes out his phaser and fires right at Weyoun, who isn't there. Act 2. Dukat cooks up some food for himself and Sisko. While Dukat tries to make light of their situation, the reversal of their roles, Sisko is not finding much humor in any of it. Dukat pushes a bit more, probing about his friends on Deep Space Nine and how they feel about him. It's not like that, though. Even if the Dominion were pulling all the strings, nobody was glad to have Dukat there, and they all wanted to see him go. Sisko has to remind him that they are not friends, and that there is not a benefit of the doubt to be given here, even if Dukat saved his life this time. Dukat's distracted by a noise or something outside that he must go investigate, and just beyond their cave he's confronted by Damar. Like Weyoun, though, just a product of Dukat's fragile imagination. Damar urges Dukat to kill Sisko, but he's far too invested in hearing from the captain that he actually admires him. But the faux Damar goes on. Imagine how much adulation Dukat will receive from Cardassia if he returns with the body of the emissary, wiping away the confidence the Bajorans have in their own government. It'll have to wait, though. Dukat isn't ready to kill Sisko. So what has Sisko been up to while Dukat has this strange conversation? He discovered that the distress beacon isn't working at all. The internal status shows that it's offline, even though the outer display shows otherwise. When Dukat returns to their part of the cave, Sisko suggests that he should have a look at it. On the inside. Maybe run a diagnostic just to make sure. Dukat does so, but then says that Everything is fine. It's working perfectly. And that's all that Sisko needs to know. Act 3. Worf and crew are doing pretty well. They've picked up some survivors of the Honshu, but still no Sisko, and their time is running out. Speaking of running out of time, when Dukat is out of the cave for a moment, the captain has managed to get the transmitter back online, and what do you know? Right on cue, the Defiant picks up a signal. We'll check in with that later. Sisko is hidden his tracks, feigning being asleep when Dukat comes back in. Dukat is all chit-chatty as usual, reporting how awful the conditions are outside, and now with the fire in front of them, he tells Sisko that the Bajorans would be confused if they saw the two of them like this. What would they possibly say about Gul Dukat and the emissary getting along like two old friends that they are? And then Sisko gives Dukat a steely gaze. But Dukat presses on, and then the next hallucination starts. This time it's Major Kira telling Dukat that both she and Sisko think he's a cold-blooded murderer who should have been tried long ago for his war crimes. Sisko, for his part, says he wasn't there. He can't pass judgment, which only plays into the imaginary Kira, who tells Dukat that he's just trying to placate the Gul. Finally, Dukat asks again, what does Sisko think of him? Sisko's answer is measured. Dukat has been misunderstood, perhaps. He had good reasons for everything he did. Dukat agrees, but the imaginary Kira just laughs and laughs. He's being played by Sisko. Can't he see? Finally, Dukat lashes out directly at Kira, who reveals to Sisko that there's more going on here. He plays along. Maybe they should just talk and pretend like Kira's not even there. He may not have to keep this up much longer. On the Defiant, they've locked onto the distress signal, and they're getting closer. Good thing, because now imaginary Kira is working up Dukat to the point that he pulls out his phaser and starts shooting up the cave, barely missing Sisko. But the Defiant has locked on and beamed up, not Sisko and not Dukat, but rather two different people from the Honshu. They're beaming in the wrong place. Cut to things settled down a little in the cave. In the melee, Sisko's things had been tousled around, and Dukat spies a fork with a tine broken off, and he wonders why Sisko would have done such a thing for a little piece of metal. Aha! It's the distress beacon. And Dukat raises his weapon again and fires it, permanently destroying the transmitter just as the Defiant had picked it up. With Dukat now feeling betrayed, he raises a long section of metal and strikes down near the captain. Act 4. The Defiant is in the right area, but it was the wrong signal, and now Major Kira is trying to call them back to get on with their next mission. But the message is garbled, and nobody on the bridge can hear it. Really, except they know. And so does Worf, who is in charge, and he's a very by-the-book kind of guy. And in this instance, he's carrying out the search right up to the last minute by scouting the third planet in the system. Sisko, beaten badly by Dukat, challenges the Gul again. What does he want? Because if it's some kind of acceptance or forgiveness for what he did on Bajor, he's not going to get it. In Sisko's eyes, Dukat is a murderer who oversaw the deaths of 5 million Bajorans while he was prefect. No, he's got it all wrong. Dukat insists he was trying to save lives, improving the labor camps. And those ungrateful Bajorans reacted by blowing up a Cardassian orbital platform. So Dukat executed 200 suspected Bajoran resistance members. Now all the voices in his head are chiming in. Weyoun, Damar, Kira. It's Kira who says they didn't want reconciliation. They wanted to kill the Cardassian occupiers. And it's Weyoun who says the Dominion wouldn't have been as generous as Dukat. Sisko asks if he's got it right. The Bajorans didn't appreciate what Dukat did for them. They pushed him to act out the way he did. And Dukat says, yes, they were blind, ignorant fools and brought it on themselves. It was clear the Cardassians were superior in every way. The justification continues. To Dukat, the Bajorans brought it on themselves by not accepting the occupation. Their stubborn pride made it worse, and he hated them for it. What was that? Sisko pushes. Dukat hated them, and he wishes he had killed every last one of them. With his back turned, as Dukat slips further into his own rage directed at his hallucinations, Sisko uses the metal debris to knock out his captor. Act 5. With Dukat knocked out, Sisko escapes the cave and makes his way to the shuttle. The lead is short-lived, though, as Dukat has regained consciousness and chases Sisko down, physically removing him from the shuttle and throwing him to the ground outside. He vows that he'll show Bajorans what it really means to have him as an enemy. The fight continues, but Dukat has the upper hand and makes his way into the shuttle, closing the rear hatch, with Sisko left on the ground outside. The shuttle, which must have been working all along, takes Dukat off-planet, but he left a signal, one that the Defiant picked up just before leaving the area for their rendezvous with the troop convoy. They weren't able to locate the shuttle, but they were able to rescue Sisko. On board Defiant now, in recovery and in sickbay, the captain confides in Dax that his time with Dukat has convinced him that there is no gray area here. Dukat is truly evil, and Sisko won't let him do anything to Bajor. He says that he fears no evil, and it's him or me. The end.
Well, we have a lot of layers to peel back here because there's a lot of shades of gray to get through. But let's start off with a couple of the things that kind of stuck out with us during our observations here.
Early on in the brig, and just, automatically a great scene. It's really nice when DS9 can do this thing that it does well, which is pick up a plot thread, pick up a character arc, and just continue to go with it from episode to episode. So we want to know what happened to Dukat. Where is he now? What is his state of mind? And he says something to Sisko, I'll take a bottle of Kanar and an Orion slave girl. Still a little bothersome that this is a thing in the 24th century that you can just ask for and it's sort of understood. But I get it. This is Star Trek lore, and Sisko is just hearing out Dukat. But I didn't expect that here. Some 30 plus years into Star Trek history.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up Renee, though, at the beginning, saying that he wasn't really cut out for directing or it's something that he didn't really enjoy that much, because I really thought that he directed that brig scene, really quite deftly as a director. There are some really nice choices that he made, such as, establishing that Dukat was on his knees, but then shooting up at Avery and creating this aspect of Sisko kind of both physically and in a way of looking down on him, physically and mentally looking down on Dukat, and Dukat looking up at his captor and someone who's bested him in that nice physical representation. Yeah. I thought that was really, really well shot. I liked the Honshu, rest in pieces, I guess, because it got blown out of the sky.
Yes.
But nebula classes are interesting, and I never really noticed this before, but and certainly not on the Defiant. But when Sisko was walking towards the brig, there was that kind of red, I guess, a red directional line,
right,
that was on the hallway. And is that supposed to be like, this is the way to the brig?
Yeah.
I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah, no, it's nice, and it is just one of those little set dresser details that when you're using an existing set but then need to make it look like you're on another ship, just throw in a stripe, throw in a color, change up a lighting pattern a little bit, and boom, now we're on a new ship, and you don't look at it and go, oh, wait, they just are shooting in the Defiant sets again. And for the same thing with the brig, I would need to go back and rewatch a little Voyager to see exactly what they changed from the Voyager brig set. But I thought that was super cool too. Again, easy, inexpensive, but it stands out to you. You go like, oh, well, that is definitely a Honshu set, not the Defiant.
Yeah, I mean, that's the great thing about production designers and being able to kind of like reconfigure set dressings to have something that's already been established look completely fresh and new. I thought that was really, really smart. But I do have a question, though, about technology in the 24th century. So when we're recording our shows, and people on that listen to the podcast know that we can do it through Zoom, we can do it telecommunications-wise. So I guess that when you're testifying for a special case like Dukat's, you can't do it through subspace communications? Is that the deal?
I thought maybe it's been a long time since they've had a pandemic. But yeah, you'd think that just using some sort of subspace would be much more preferable than hauling people around the galaxy.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Zoom at this time in the 24th century is a little bit more stable, but we did run into some subspace interference at just the right time.
We
in this
did,
episode,
we did.
We'll get to
definitely that. Definitely a TV drama moment manufactured. And speaking of which, I do get, this is, manufactured TV drama, and we constantly have to raise the stakes. But in addition to technology like Zoom, definitely Starfleet used some technology like additional ships. I know you've just been through huge battles. There are a lot of casualties, a lot of lost ships. But to only have the Defiant and only have the Constellation go out and search, get some search ships. Come on. We can do this. I feel confident in you.
It is such a Star Trek trope about you're the only ship in the
only
quadrant.
Ship that can do this. Yeah.
So Starfleet's really not a fleet, it feels like sometimes,
right?
Right. I mean, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, aside from the Defiant searching for Sisko, we did mention the USS Constellation. So is this in the same name lineage line that Commodore Decker's Constellation was?
Yeah. So we don't know exactly where. I mean, we have to assume that this Constellation, this is the 24th century variant of the Constellation, the one that's referenced in TNG.
Like the Stargazer. Right.
What was the Stargazer Constellation class at that point? Okay.
Yeah.
But the Constellation in TOS time was a Constitution class ship. So
right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So you just come up with a new design. You're like, okay, we're going to use an old name, but throw it on a new design, and that'll be the class on which others are made. So, as you know, fortunately, there are a lot of good books out there by people with the last name Okuda to help you sort through it all.
That's right. Also, break out your Franz Joseph technical manuals if you want to see the original Constitution class designs. Right. Speaking of really great designs, I do love me a very cool looking tactical display table. And the one in Ops, the one that Oda was leaning over, I'm like, okay, here we go. There's some good looking overlays going on here.
Love stuff like that.
I've been in a marketing position for quite a long time now, and one of the things they told us in marketing is never actually give a round number because they seem disingenuous when it comes to offering somebody some type of value. So when you have 12 hours here and 12 hours there, it just seems a little lazy to me when it comes to the details of a mission. Like, okay, it takes 12 hours to get there and then 12 hours to get to somewhere else. I mean, why not just these are technical people. This is Star Trek, so like it would take 11.57 hours to get there, and it will take 9.82 hours to get back.
Right.
I was just expecting something like that.
Well, because you have warp engines. They go at variable speeds. And I'm not assuming it's not like you have to come back to DS9, and it's not like DS9 is perfectly triangulated with where they have to wind up for the rendezvous. So, yeah, it was that was a little strange. I agree with you.
Where's a Vulcan when you need
them,
right?
Exactly. Yeah. After all was said and done, and look, I'm not going to just throw out conspiracies spuriously on our show. Do you think Dukat and Sisko were just lucky to escape together? Like did McConnell actually get killed by shrapnel, or did Dukat off him? Because I might have to go with that theory.
Or neither. You never know with Dukat.
Yeah, right?
I mean, he's just crafting his story so that Sisko buys into his whole plot. But more important are the words that you just said, and I think that we have our band name for today. We have Scurrilous Conspiracy.
Oh, yeah. Oh, good. I like that. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. For Sisko in the cave, that is a very cool cast. Look, I'll just say now, I've never broken a bone. Don't want to jinx it by saying that. But if I did, and again, let's hope that I don't, I would want that cast. It is a space cast.
I like that. They cast it well.
Does the fun ever start? Yeah.
I like it. I like the clunky arm cast. Much to Dukat's credit, he's like, I don't know how to use this stuff, but there's a cast, I put it on you. What do you want me to do? Shoot me. Oh, wait, hold on a second. I'll shoot you instead.
See, wait, I might say that Dukat might even know how the bone mending device, he might know how that stuff works. he might have destroyed it. He's there. He's just keeping Sisko under his thumb as long as he can until he gets out of him what he wants. So that piece of medical equipment could have worked. He could have made a brilliant cast, but he decided to do that interesting metal sculptural piece. I will say this from an acting point of view, like Kira is different here. She's somewhere in between the Kira that we know and the, say, like Intendant Kira, just sort of like laying around and being really in your face. And Damar, pretty much Damar, gotta say, the great thing about the real Weyoun and Paranoid Delusion Weyoun, they're basically the same guy. Just that smarmy, manipulative. Oh, God, he's so great.
Yeah, I mean, Jeffrey Combs, no matter what slice of Weyoun you get, he's still going to steal the scene. But I do like what you said about these characters, because they're all like the mentally distilled versions of how Dukat perceived them. Like, Kira was just this incessant, and I hate to say this word because it's not, and I'll say it in a disparaging way, an incessant nag to him. Yeah. Like, they always had this relationship of kind of like the divorced parents that were always at each other's throats. Yeah. And Kira knew exactly what to say, how to say it to drive Dukat over the edge. Damar, on this hand, though, he was feeding into Dukat's ego the way that Damar would.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
But even more so in this hallucination. And then, of course, Weyoun, again, was always this foil for Dukat, and even more so as the hallucination. So I thought those were really good choices there.
Yeah. Hey, something that I didn't look up and it just popped into my mind, that transmitter prop, I wonder if that was the same prop that Odo and Quark had to carry up that mountain. Because that was a big piece of equipment there. I'd have to go double check. But something that I do...
But what was Quark on a mountain?
What is Quark climbing a mountain? But I do love that transmitter and its big display system offline. Like, I think that should just be a design standard from now on. We should simplify a lot of our electronics these days, and instead of multiple readouts or error codes, just one that says working or not working. Done. Like, what's wrong with your computer? It's not working. Oh, here, let's do this. Hey, look, now it's working. Cool. That's
24th century easy button.
Yep.
Right there.
Yep, totally is. And I like how that transmitter works the same way that a CD-ROM drive on an old computer works. You need a paper clip to stick in the little hole to make it work again. That's what Sisko needed with that fork time.
Isn't it funny nowadays that like most smartphones are actually packaged with like an actual real designer paper clip for your SIM tray?
Love that.
That is the ultimate tool. The ultimate tool for computers. It truly is.
Yeah, like a Swiss Army knife now should come with that. Just like a tiny little thin poker. Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, why would you need that at all? Because, technology, no matter if it's now or the 24th century, if you just give it a little bit of a smack, it'll work.
Oh, totally. Yeah, hit it.
Just tap on it.
Yeah,
it'll work.
Yeah, and I wonder who the first person was to find that out. Because I remember my grandfather smacking the TV, but somebody before him was like, well, it's not working. Somebody in the RCA lab was like, I don't know, what if you just hit it? And they did, and that stuck. I feel really badly for those survivors on the Defiant. The ensign and the lieutenant who were on the Honshu, who got beamed up. And they had the audacity to be rescued by the Defiant and not be Captain Sisko.
I have many thoughts.
The look of disappointment on O'Brien's.
I have many thoughts.
Okay, all right, yes. And yes, we get the old the subspace interference excuse. Classic to use that one. But hey, and you may have thoughts on this too, Dr. Bashir. You may forgive me if I don't consider your honor to be worth the captain's life. That right there, my friend, that Dr. Bashir just said in one line what we've been picking apart about Klingon honor in I don't know how many episodes. So bravo, sir. Bravo.
See, I'll give Worf a pass on this one.
Yeah? Okay.
To be honest with you, John, because, well, yes, we can make fun of Worf, and we can make, we can point out that, yes, we have been saying that about Worf's honor. But at the same time, though, when it comes to this, Bashir is essentially, and I also have many thoughts on this later, but for this, Bashir was going to go against orders. Kira specifically said, do not delay the transport protection. And yes, it is Captain Sisko. But as we know, he is one man in a fleet of important people. And who knows who those troops were going to go and protect.
Yeah.
So I do like that Bashir kind of throws it back at Worf, but Worf's like, you can get off my bridge at any time,
hey,
bro.
Look, I don't disagree with Worf saying that. And I don't disagree that Bashir is being insubordinate in that moment. I'm just so glad he said it. that feeds my soul right there. Yeah.
Sisko may be doing a waltz. Dukat seems to be doing interpretive breakdance to a dubstep soundtrack.
We'll continue our waltz in a moment, but first, a word from our sponsor this week, ExpressVPN.
Hey, Norman and our listeners, how about a little word about privacy? There are certain rooms, maybe in your house or your office, where you probably close the door behind you. You don't want just random people walking by, checking in on you, getting into your business. So why would you let people look in on you when you go online? Because that's what you're doing if you're not using ExpressVPN. In fact, using the internet without ExpressVPN is like, using a private room and not closing the door.
Also, did you know that your internet service provider, say Comcast or Verizon or Spectrum, they know every single website you visit, and what's worse is that they can sell this information to ad companies and tech giants who will use your data to target you. So ExpressVPN puts a stop to this. It creates a secure and encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet so that your online activity can't be used or seen by anyone.
Now, you've heard us talk about this before. You know that Norman and I use ExpressVPN on all of our devices because it just works on everything with one button. We put it on phones, laptops. You can put it on routers. You can put it on some smart TVs, smart devices, tablets. So literally, everyone who shares your Wi-Fi, they can still be protected even if they don't have ExpressVPN because it's right there on your router. And the best part is using ExpressVPN is as easy as closing the bathroom door. Yeah, I just said it. It is. So you fire up the app, you click one button, you are protected. ExpressVPN is the world's #1 rated VPN by CNET, Wired, The Verge, me and Norman, and countless others.
I love when the wireless connection shows the ExpressVPN icon on the top because that's like locking that door behind you. So if you're like me and believe your online activity is your business in the room that you do your business, secure yourself by visiting expressvpn.com/missionlog today. Use our exclusive link at expressvpn.com/missionlog and you can get an extra 3 months free. That's expressvpn.com/missionlog.
Hey, everybody, I'm Tawny Newsome.
I know, and I'm Paul F. Tompkins.
Yeah, I know. Why are you telling me? Look, and we're back with Season 2 of Star Trek The Pod Directive.
We know who we are. If you are new to the show, we are huge Star Trek fans. We're talking to other Star Trek fans about being Star Trek fans. I almost said they were huge Star Trek fans, too. There's varying degrees.
Look, everyone's a Star Trek fan here. Nobody's not a Star Trek fan. Different types of fans about, fans of different series collectively. It's a lot of different stuff. We have a lot of fun this season. We talk to all kinds of cool people. We talk to Michelle Yeoh, Paul Scheer and Amy Nicholson, Justin Simeon, my buddy Jack Quaid, and more.
And more. Subscribe to Star Trek The Pod Directive on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. It's none of our business.
Yes, there are several apps. There are so many places you can listen. All that matters is that you listen and that you love us and that you rate and subscribe and subscribe.
All right, on to our waltz. Norman, our psychological waltz, our waltz of words, if you will. And speaking of psychology, I think this episode does such a good job right from the top. We mentioned that teaser scene in the brig on the Honshu and how not only is it written well, not only is it acted well, but it is shot in such a way to tell you everything you need to know about these two characters and their relationship to each other. And I really like what we're getting about Sisko's psychology right from the beginning. That opening narration alone, that says it all about his mixed feelings toward Dukat and his desire to be above that base feeling to just see him dead. And what's interesting is how it all unfolds, how it all unpacks over the course of the episode until you get to that final scene. And we will talk about that, obviously, as well. Interesting choice of words with Sisko there. But he says in that opening narration that it would be unbecoming of a Starfleet officer to just see him dead, to see Dukat dead. And on top of that, he's actually feeling some sympathy, or sympathy may not be the exact word, but some understanding about Dukat losing his daughter and losing his mind, having this incredibly tumultuous experience over the last several weeks. So, this is an episode that definitely stops short of, say, a classic Trek episode where it's all about understanding the enemy and finding common ground. It's not about that. And I think that's okay that we end up in a different place. But I really appreciate that we start with Sisko trying to approach this as broadly as he does and being honest about how he sees Dukat.
Yeah, what I liked about this scene in his opening captain's log, it's that in the last couple of episodes, we have been highly critical of Sisko's motivations about being a little too apt to fire first and ask questions later. He's embracing his wartime attitude. But here, we are kind of in the resolution phase of Dukat's capture. He is going to be brought to justice. And I think that Sisko's getting a moment of clarity here where he can step back from himself and say, what has this man lost? What has it done to him? Mm-hmm. And I'm a human being. I'm returning to being in touch with my sensibilities and my moralities and looking at this from a bigger picture. This isn't just a war criminal. This is somebody who has lost everything. And maybe Sisko is reflecting on the fact that he almost was in Dukat's position if it weren't for a strange twist of fate, the Deus Ex Machina that we talked about from Sacrifice of Angels. Right. It could have been him as easily. So it's nice to see him being the bigger man to Dukat and just giving him the benefit of the doubt from a humanistic standpoint. Not necessarily saying that he's clear of all charges, but I'm going to show him mercy. Yeah. Because this is what we as Starfleet are trained to do, are taught to believe. Yeah,
that's the important distinction. He's not walking in there just saying like, how can I exonerate Dukat? No, but he is asking himself, how do I see him as a person who has also been through some terrible things, but also needs to stand trial? And I need to be honest about his role in everything that just went down. And this is an episode that, stylistically, I just think it works in the respect that, it reminds me of episodes like Chain of Command, I think, very clearly. And, of course, any of the episodes where you've got two stranded characters at opposite ends. Like you could say like Duet or Darmok, where you're just focusing on these two. But in this one, I think what's so brilliant here, you've got a lot more history between the characters. And then you add to it the complication of Dukat's mental state. This is a different Dukat than the one that Sisko knows or thinks he knows. And Dukat is lashing out in all these ways because, he's trying to get something else out of Sisko that he hasn't really tried to go for before. So speaking of Dukat, what motivates Dukat? and so I think there are multiple answers to that, and I think that those answers can change from scene to scene or episode to episode or era to era in Dukat's career. But there's a lot that gets unpacked here about what drives him. And the most interesting part of it is that he needs approval, even adoration of everyone around him. So Zial, and we talked before about how with Zial, she's somebody that he needs on a personal level. He needs that family connection to her, but he also needs her almost as a political prop. He needs her to complete the picture, Mm-hmm. He needs Kira, and he needs her not only to sort of justify his position to Bajorans, but there's also that personal attraction to her. So he needs that out of her as well. And then he needs this out of Sisko. He needs that approval and adoration. Like we're speaking warrior to warrior here. He needs it out of the Bajorans. But in each of those situations, he has to be in charge. He has to be the one who has the upper hand no matter what. And he is filled with ideologically scary ideas about his own superiority by birthright. And you just go back to any of our discussions about the Cardassians reflecting Nazi history too. But it's all to what end? You know? Mm-hmm. What is it actually in the end that Dukat hopes to gain from any of this? What is the ultimate pat on the back for Dukat? What is the let's say that there is no more Bajoran resistance. Let's say that Zial is alive. Let's say that the Federation is no longer a threat to him at all, and he just gets to live out his days on, well, Terok Nor or on Bajor. What would still drive him? Because he still just needs to win over anybody that he hasn't won over.
I think there's something about him manifesting true Cardassian cultural power, just the society that he was raised in. There's something that's very male-centric, because we always heard about those references where even like Damar said, for our sons, Dukat said the same thing. He's very prideful of his son. He mentioned it one time when Sisko was his captor and was talking about his son's birthday. I think it's just that he's wired that way. If there was an episode that was apropos to the parable of the scorpion and the frog, it would be this episode.
Yeah.
Because Dukat is the forever Scorpion antagonist of this series. It's just who he is. It's what he does. No matter how far he may seem to come, or no matter how much progress he may make, even with this small and temporary detente that he has with Sisko, he'll ultimately betray you, or Sisko in this case, because that's his nature. That's just who he is. And I think that's something he can't even reconcile with it himself. And it makes him fascinating. His narcissism reaches probably its apex in this episode, because he's just trying to keep his insanity in check, but at the same time trying to manipulate Sisko. Let's go back to Sacrifice of Angel, and I think that this quote, this discussion that he had with Weyoun in particular, was very much at the at the heart of Dukat in Waltz. Dukat says, "A true victory is to make your enemies see they were wrong to oppose you in the first place, to force them to acknowledge your greatness." And then Weyoun says, "Then you kill them." And Dukat says only if it's necessary. He does not want his enemies to die. He wants them to be subjugated.
And to praise him and to thank him for being their leader. Yeah.
He is the ultimate gaslighting leader. He wants them to see that no matter how horrific the atrocities that he's perpetrated on an entire people or an entire quadrant, it's because it's in your, and I say your being the Bajorans, best interests. You do not know what you want. I will tell you and show you what you want. As painful as it may be for me to wipe out millions of your population, it's because I love you, and you should love me for that in return.
Yeah.
That is terrifying to see.
It is. And it's so interesting because, what you're describing is this note that I took, which is that Dukat seems like he really is the ultimate product of Cardassian society. Like he is just every one of the Cardassian ideals boiled down on him, almost to the point where Cardassian society has created a monster that they can't even control. We don't know how all the other Guls are, and we saw some cracks in Damar, which I thought was really interesting, because it's not like everybody is exactly like Dukat. And Garak is too smart. That's why there aren't many in the Obsidian Order, and they actually keep pretty quiet. They pull strings in the background where they can. But Dukat, he's just the perfect expression of Cardassian values without any concern for anything else. That's really interesting to see. And then what are those values? What are the things that are driving him here and what he wants? And we get into this really scary dialogue, when Sisko keeps calling him out and saying, you're not responsible for, he's baiting him, obviously. You're not responsible for what happened to the Bajorans during the occupation. The Bajorans are, yes, exactly. There's the twisted logic of, like you were just describing, Norman, that bullying strongman leader of any sort. Could be on the playground. It could be in national politics. They were forced to act the way they did. Oh, sure, that's the justification. And the Cardassians saying, that they were superior in every way. And the Bajorans could have avoided all this conflict if they just accepted it. Truly, this is one of the most chilling things to hear in this episode. Not because it's, not only because it's just scary within the context of the episode, but because as awful and twisted as it is, it's the same logic used anytime in distant or in very recent history that is used to justify the subjugation of any outgroup at all. And he's so sort of sniveling when he says, pride, like some twisted badge of honor when he's describing the Bajorans, which is interesting because it's okay for the Cardassians, but it's not okay for the, finger quote, inferior Bajorans. The Cardassians are full of pride about everything that they do. They would dare not be taken over by anybody else except when it's politically expedient, like the Dominion. And there they were, just ready to allow the Dominion to run things, maybe the way that they would have expected the Bajorans to allow them to run things.
Well, hence the hallucination of Weyoun and the way that Weyoun's able to get underneath his skin, because he's showing him a reality that Dukat just can't comprehend or even accept, the way that his state of mind is. And we also saw that up to a point where when Odo was he was having those flashbacks to when he was back on Terok Nor as the security and interrogator, and that's when Garak was in Quarks and he was talking about Bajorans as if they were just nothing. They were menial. They were slaves. They were unintelligent. And he didn't say it to be mean. He said it because that's what Cardassians are raised to believe. That came out of his stream of consciousness as easy as breathing.
Yeah.
That's just the way that the Cardassians were. That's their pride of their culture and their cultural empowerment over other lesser species. At least that's how they perceive them. But I wanted to kind of like turn this conversation a little bit towards mercy, because mercy is a little bit of a theme in this episode. We saw Sisko at least try to offer Dukat some modicum of mercy, as the better man when Dukat was in the brig. But what about the rest of his officers in this episode? As I said before, when we were talking about those fortunate few that were rescued by the Defiant and weren't Sisko, the reactions of his crew really bothered me in this episode because, well, I don't know. I mean, I might be the only one, or maybe there's a small percentage of fans out there that were also bothered. But O'Brien's reaction to just seeing those two people that he saved, that really set me off a little bit, because they're Starfleet officers in distress. It is your responsibility to save as many of the Federation citizens, and in this case, your fellow Starfleet officers. Well, not fellow officers, because the chief's not an officer, but you know what I mean. It's their duty.
Yeah.
To answer those distress signals and to save as many of these Starfleet officers from peril. I mean, O'Brien says, I've locked onto them, and then he looked at the two women who were obviously injured. Now, yes, Dr. Bashir went to go treat them, but he says, transporter room to bridge, we have the survivors on board, 2 women. Okay, it's not their captain, but you'd think he'd be more excited about that. Like, we've found survivors from the Honshu. Maybe they can tell us what happened. Maybe they can tell us where Sisko is, but it's just, And then Dax's, her expression, in the cutscene, she's like,
disappointment.
Yeah.
I mean, so look, here we are, and look, I apologize right up front, but listeners, you know that we're right. We're putting on our writers' hats here, and we're saying
Writer as in WR or writers on RIGHT?
both, yeah. This would have been a really simple fix because all you had to do, even if you kept the script basically the same, you could say as director here or producer, or just somebody watching from off stage, okay, play that scene again, but play it with relief that you got these two. You know, that's honestly all that you would have to do because, yes, exactly to your point, and I thought exactly the same thing. Thank goodness, what a relief. We got two more people from the Honshu. They may have valuable information. With those two down, now we go on to the next one. Let's get out of here and go find where the next signal is coming from and make sure that we have left no stone unturned. That should have been a moment of relief, not disappointment. And I would have been, God, if this were real life, those two women, I mean, I would write this up. I would write this up in a report. Yeah.
Welcome to Defiant. Hope you enjoy your stay.
Yeah.
Here's a cold Raktajino.
Right.
But, you know, the thing that bothered me a lot in this episode were these characterizations of the Defiant crew. Now, yes, I'm not going to fault them for being loyal to Sisko, and obviously they want their captain back. That is not to be debated. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, though, I'm sure that they maybe knew some people on the Honshu. Maybe they even know some people on those troop carriers.
Yeah.
But the thing is that they're all in Starfleet together. It's their organization. It's their band of brothers. It's their cadre. These are people that they've learned to respect because they went through the same things that they went through. And you know what? We're in this war together.
Yeah.
The more of us that are there to fight the Dominion, the better. The less of us diminishes us as a whole. So, yeah, when they said, we got two, wasn't the captain, we'll get him next time.
Yeah.
There should have been a more optimistic response to that. And it just was like, they were like, oh, really? What a waste.
Yeah. That
and I just scene, that bummed me out.
Ooh, it sticks out like a sore thumb. And like I said, it's a simple fix. Just give our cast, even if they acknowledge to each other, like, well, we still have to find Sisko when time is running out, that's fine too. But you have to actually be respectful and relieved and glad of the fact that you got two more people from the Honshu. They have families who are waiting for them back at home, okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. True enough. Now, did you get kind of like the spiritual energy in this episode, say from all the way back to Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness?
Okay. So now that you mention it, I didn't think about it, but now that you mention it, there's a really interesting and shared energy in this episode, all the way back to referencing Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, or perhaps if people aren't familiar with that book, they were probably familiar with the adaptation of that book in movie form, which was Apocalypse Now by Francis Ford Coppola. Because we saw, much like Kurtz, we saw Dukat's descent into madness amidst this attempt to prove to Sisko that he's the better man, much like, say, Brando's Kurtz was trying to do to Captain Miller, played by Martin Sheen. Dukat was the enemy that could have killed Sisko, but he kind of rose above that. As petty as he is, he kind of rose above that for his own machinations. Mm-hmm. And that's where I found Dukat so wonderful to watch, because you're trying to figure him out, what is he playing at here? Yeah.
And by the end, he's totally unraveled, and he proved that to Sisko, with the way that he felt about the Bajorans and the way that he says, I should have killed them all. But it's the way that you're trying to second guess what exactly is going on with Dukat, what's in his head, why are these hallucinations affecting him so, and how is he keeping this all in balance to the point where he can try and deceive Sisko into having the captain believe that Dukat is somewhat on his side, that they're peers and friends. I found that fascinating to watch.
It certainly is, and I think we're on our way to wrapping that up.
On a scale of 1 to infinity, where do you put Dukat? About 87? Yeah, that's what I came up with too.
Well, John, now that we're at the end of our show, and hopefully we've silenced all of the voices in our heads, now we can have a moment of clarity and see, how did this episode hold up for us? Did we waltz through what we needed to get through? And what are the morals, meanings, and messages that our time in the cave has been able to educate us about?
It's good callback to the title there, yeah. So, like last week, this is one of those episodes where the story that's going on, almost secondary. And I don't mean that it's unimportant, but I mean that at least my first experience with this episode is that this is about seeing just top-notch performances in that intimate setting. You could hand Mark Alimo a McDonald's menu and ask him to read it, and I'd come away with tears in my eyes. I mean, he's powerful and charismatic, and he owns every scene that he's in here. And so interesting still that here is this quote-unquote evil character, and we're going to get to that in a moment as well. But even in those scenes where he's losing it, there's still at least a tiny shred of you that can feel this sympathy. Like, here's a guy that's absolutely losing his mind. And everything that he's processing completely the wrong way. And this is something that I read about the writers, though, that with this episode, they were trying to give a little pushback to the audience. Dukat was and is an evil character, but the audience wanted more of him, and they liked him. And maybe like isn't exactly the right word, but they were intrigued by him. So here's Ira and Ron saying, no, Dukat is the worst of the worst, and you should hate him. But then drama is what we're here for, and you need actors who can pull it off and bring you into the character's reality. Otherwise, why are we watching it? It's just get rid of the bad guy and you're done. You move on to the next story. There's also a danger of high drama equaling yelling for some less skilled actors, but that's not the case here. You rank up the energy, and it still works, it's still believable, and you still absolutely buy what's happening. When you consider how much of a TV episode is shot out of order, it's even more impressive to see the build and crescendo of what's happening here with Dukat and Sisko. I said before, it reminds me of episodes like Chain of Command or Duet, again, where you're just letting the actors find their way and bring as much truth to the performance as you possibly can. So they knock it out of the park in all of those respects here. And I'll also give them this. The script is really clever. I like the fake out of the Defiant beaming up the wrong people. And we talk about why they treated that incorrectly, but I like the way they wrote and edited those sequences so that you are led to believe, like, oh, wait, we're getting there, what's going to be the cliffhanger, but then it changes your expectation. So I like that. I just didn't like the emotional reaction on board the Defiant. And finally, that shot of Weyoun, Damar, and Kira standing in the shuttle with Dukat as he closes the hatch. It's not necessary, but it is so worth it. And that was just a great visual, dramatic moment to end this episode and absolutely leave you wanting more to find out where this story will go with Dukat. So I think they did everything perfectly here, except for that reaction on Defiant. I think they got it right. I think the pacing was good. The acting is just tremendous. And what it leads us into with the psychology of these characters was great. So I think it's a terrific episode, a terrific slice of DS9 that fits neatly with what has come before and wants us, or leads us to want more. So it works incredibly well. It definitely holds up. How about you?
Well, I mean, before I jump into my thoughts, I really do like how you brought up Chain of Command and Duet, because now we've added Dukat into these three incredibly powerful performances of specifically Cardassian gulls. And I find that fascinating because you have Gul Madred, David Warner, who turned in a tour de force performance in Chain of Command. You had Harris Yulin as Maritza, or portraying the gull because he wanted to be punished for that gull's crimes. Obviously, one of the best performances, I think, in the history of Star Trek or science fiction. But now you have Mark Alimo, and yet for me, this episode works, and I think it stands the test of time solely because of what he brings to the table. He absolutely magnetizes your eyes to the screen. You can't help but watch all the different permutations of his personality in conflict with itself. Mm-hmm. Whether it's, did he kill that officer on the Honshu to let Sisko escape, or didn't he? He very well might be telling the truth, but you never know, because that scorpion sting is going to get you in the end if you believe it or not. His machinations with Sisko, what is he trying to do here? What is he trying to prove? Is he trying to prove that he is, in fact, more merciful? Because he always cannot stand the fact that somebody's going to one-up his thunder, right? And that's what Sisko did at the beginning. I mean, Sisko set the tone with it. He says, as terrible as it sounds, there's a part of me that wishes he were dead, but that's a thought unworthy of a Starfleet officer. He's talking about Gul Dukat. He lost an empire, he lost his daughter, and he nearly lost his mind. Whatever his crimes, isn't that enough punishment for one lifetime? And I think that Sisko's right about that. And I think that that really sets the tone for us as the audience to maybe give Gul Dukat a second chance, at least in this story. But then we see what happens, and there are a couple of story points that I'm not really still on board with, because where Sisko is shining, or I should say a shining example of how a Starfleet officer's feelings are reconciled with his personal motivations versus his oath as a Starfleet officer, we saw that in direct contrast with the way that the rest of his team treated the mission at hand and the way that those other crew members were beamed up that they rescued from the Honshu. I mean, think about it this way. They put the interests of 30,000 Federation troops that were being deployed to be protected by Kira's direct orders not to deviate from that plan because they wanted to save Sisko. I understand that, but I'm sure that Bashir's obstinance, it rubbed off on maybe O'Brien as well. I also found that it's interesting that Worf and Dax, they created their alliance very quickly in terms of towing the line in the order and not skirting what Kira was saying based on subspace static, and how O'Brien and Bashir took the opposite stance, and they're using that as a way to cover themselves if, in fact, defying a direct order blew up in their face.
Yeah.
So I found that interesting dichotomy between those two alliances on the crew. But I'll tell you what, man, just for the sheer performance alone, you rarely get something like this in Star Trek, a single tour de force performance, and that in and of itself is worthy of standing the test of time.
Yeah, for sure. Now let's talk about morals, meanings, messages. So we said it before on Mission Log, and it is certainly true here, this phrase, the villain is the hero of his own story, and that is absolutely the case with Dukat. There's not necessarily a lesson there for us, but it is a glimpse into what makes him or someone like him tick, and I think that is a worthy pursuit, a worthy area of study. And there's also the other angle of how Sisko is handling all of this, which we saw evolve from that opening teaser to that very final sort of coda with Dax when he's talking to her in the infirmary or the sickbay on board Defiant. And that's what leads me to something that isn't necessarily a moral message, but it is a question that I have to sort of ponder here and see how this will play out when we are reconnected with this Sisko and Dukat story again. And that is this question of evil. Because at the end of the episode, Sisko has decided that there is no shade of gray anymore, that Dukat is evil. He is the definition of evil, and he will do everything that he can to end Dukat. Now, granted, he's just been through this horrible experience with Dukat. We get it. He's gotten Dukat to bare his soul about his true feelings, and he's figured out what makes him tick. But what happens when you dehumanize your opponent completely? Because Dukat did that to the Bajorans. He said that they were inferior in every way. He said that he wanted them all to die. So what becomes of Sisko and his state of mind when he adopts a similar stance to say that Dukat is evil, Dukat needs to be killed no matter what. No, it needs to be stopped no matter what. Yes, his actions need to be stopped. But does Sisko become in any way the enemy that he is trying to defeat? And clearly it's a different tactic. Clearly Sisko is responding to the things that Dukat has done. But I think it's an interesting and somewhat problematic thing to deal with at the end of this episode, with Sisko saying he is evil. That's very much not a Star Trek example that we've had up until now, with a few minor exceptions. But even somebody like Khan, we have some built-in sympathies with what he went through over 15 years on Ceti Alpha 5. This is a case where we are absolutely dehumanizing, or Sisko is dehumanizing Dukat to say, no, he is this thing, he is this nebulous idea, which is evil, as opposed to a person who has not and has the capability of doing terrible things. So that's a different Sisko at the end than the Sisko that we got at the beginning of this episode. I'm curious to see where we go with that, if there is an additional learning moment or an additional lesson to come out of that.
I feel like I need to buy a lottery ticket because of what you said, and here's why. Mm-hmm. Rarely, if ever, and I think that we've explained this to the audience, rarely, if ever, do we actually see our own notes before we start talking about them here on the show. And I am aligned with you 100%, almost to the letter.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I haven't looked at yours. You haven't looked at mine either.
Yeah. I also, before I jump into it, I find it interesting that you're almost creating this Ahab and the white whale scenario between Sisko and Dukat. What is Sisko willing to risk in order to get his whale, his white whale, his man, hit the criminal, or where, say, Eddington, was his Javert. Mm-hmm. Now Dukat has become his Javert to Valjean. Mm-hmm. I find that particular dynamic very interesting. We'll see how it plays out. But what I love about this episode is, like you said, John, we return to the age-old axiom: the villain is the hero of his or own story. We said that before about Dukat, and this is obviously done in great detail and performed brilliantly by Mark Alimo. Dukat, for me, has always been this incredibly multi-dimensional character, and he's written so well. He has a great depth of motivations that are equal parts enlightened self-interest and megalomania and narcissism, but they're all kind of kept at bay in this harmonious relationship, this dynamic that Dukat just seems to be able to manage. But what happens when that balance is disrupted? And I think that Zial's death is the thing that really broke him. It's the tragedy that he couldn't see coming. He couldn't anticipate. And from then on in, even at the beginning of this episode, even when he was calm and in the brig, we knew that he was devolving into some type of madness, because there was a strange tranquility that he had about himself. Maybe it was because of therapy. Maybe it's because this is his plan all along. But he accepted that he was captured for his war crimes, and maybe he made peace with that. Maybe he made peace with, okay, this is the sense of my life now. But when the opportunity for freedom came, he wanted to prove to Sisko that the benevolence and the grace that he afforded the Bajorans, as we have referenced before, he wanted to throw that in Sisko's face and prove to him that not only is he the better man, but in his quest to utterly destroy Bajor, or Bajor, as Dukat said,
yes,
it's because he feels it is the noble thing to do for this lesser race, and to show them that his way of cleansing their inferiority is the right way to do it. And this is where Dukat really shines as the most tragic figure, I believe, in Deep Space Nine. Mm. And I don't think that we've seen the last of him. I don't think we've seen the last of his and Sisko's dynamic. They're just too good of a combined force of nature in this show not to have back in this dynamic in some way. But on the opposite side of that coin, we have Sisko here, who summarizes the true message and the meaning for this episode, in my opinion, and that is being able to live with, or at least come to some type of terms with, a world cloaked with moral ambiguity, until something, or in this case someone, Gul Dukat, proves otherwise, when he says to Dax at the end, "You know, old man, sometimes life seems so complicated. Nothing is truly good or truly evil. Everything seems to be a shade of gray, and then you spend some time with a man like Dukat, and you realize that there really is such a thing as truly evil."
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment, executive producer Rod Roddenberry. Our website and your opportunity to comment and connect with us is missionlogpodcast.com. If you'd like to support Mission Log directly, there are a lot of new features on our Patreon, patreon.com/missionlog. And for more Star Trek news and discussion, be sure to visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, who mourns for Morn?
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers Adam Brusky, Homer Frizzell, and Mike Schabel. Sorry to wake you, but we need you to move your sleeping bags to the back of the shuttle bay. Thanks. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.